Good morning. Sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties. I was expecting to use a different piece of equipment, and it wasn't here, so we had to make other arrangements. But fortunately, Ryan was here to save the day, or we would be in trouble, or I would be in trouble. We're going to talk about the human body this morning and the evidence of God, or as I've described it here, for creation. The Bible clearly declares that we are created beings. Genesis chapter 1 verse 27 says that God created man in His own image. He created him male and female. In Psalm chapter 139 verses 13 and 14, the psalmist describes God as creating and forming His inward parts. It says, before I was born, you knitted me together. That word literally means to weave into its pieces in my mother's womb. So the Bible clearly declares that we are created. Genesis chapter 5. And I want to read a little bit from here. This is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, He made him in the likeness of God. He created them, male and female, and blessed them and called them mankind in the day they were created. Also from Isaiah chapter 45, verse 12. When God says, I have made the earth and created man on it. My hands, stretched out the heavens, and all their host I have commanded. When Jesus was talking to the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 19, in the 4th verse, He refers back to the creation and to the Scriptures and says, have you not read that He who made them at the beginning made them male and female? From a biblical perspective, we have dozens of references, and we could use the New Testament and talk about all the creation statements made by Jesus or regarding Jesus, and we could multiply this number greatly. But as you know, in our present day, almost all scientists, rather than believing that God created us, instead subscribe to evolution, at least publicly. If you are going to teach in a public institution of higher learning, any college, you would be run out of town if you were to express publicly that you believed in creation or intelligent design. They must support evolution in order to maintain their positions. Charles Darwin, who I think I have a slide in a minute, came up with and published Origin of Species in November of 1859, said that if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Charles Darwin understood that a complex design that required multiple parts at the same time in order to function was impossible with his theory of slight changes over long periods of time. When Darwin wrote The Origin of Species, even in chapter 14, he acknowledges that the process of evolution, as he described it, is not adequate to cause the beginning of life. He had to start with a life force and body, and from that then assume that changes over time could take place, which of course we know now is impossible because of our knowledge of DNA. The theory of evolution, first published November 24th, 1859, was embraced when basic life was assumed to be extremely simple. Human cells were thought to be bags of protoplasm. Drawings of the day of cell structure was extremely primitive. This is before the advance of what we would describe as modern medicine. Charles Darwin lived at the end of what we describe as medieval medical care. Now, you realize that this is before the Civil War. Civil War technology at that time, a battlefield wound was most commonly treated by amputation. They did not know the structures of the body, and even if they did, couldn't put them back together. And even if they did, they died from bacterial infection. They didn't know anything about infection at this point. There were no antibiotics. Evolution gave scientists, though, a non-God alternative to creation. And it really took off. Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 28, gives a rather lengthy discussion where Paul describes those who turn away from God. And Paul describes specifically that they did not like to retain God in their knowledge. There are people who don't want God. God blocks their path to life. They want no discussion of morality, and evolution suits them just fine. The only problem with that is the more we study the human body, the more complex we understand it is. We are extremely complex, phenomenally complex. Roughly 100 trillion cells with specialized function make up the human body. Now, in order to put that in perspective, it is hard for us to understand a trillion. That number is just so big. So, 1 million seconds is about 11 and a half days. 1 billion seconds is about 32 years. 1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years. Now, that's just for comparison of the number. And we have approximately 100 billion specialized cells in our body. That number, scientists recognize, makes us such an incredibly complex gathering of life force. There are 12 major systems in the human body that we will describe in some very limited way. But each system requires the support of the whole. None of the systems can exist by themselves, and all of them require multiple complex organs in order to function. By Darwin's own definition, when he said if there are complex organs that could not exist without small modifications, then evolution, biological or life evolution, is impossible. The vital organs that we described, the heart, lungs, brain, kidneys, liver, that was just the beginning of the body. But without those, you cannot live. Each one of these and their related systems are phenomenally complex. There are no simple organs. There just aren't. The concept that Darwin was dealing with was ignorance. They did not know how the human body functioned. Therefore, it was easy to assume things were simple. There is nothing in our body that is simple. Not a single cell is simple. Everything is complex. There are 12 major systems in the human body that biology today describes. Cardiovascular, which describes the blood pumping through your body. The digestive system, starting with your mouth, everything that we consume and the ability of the human body to absorb nutrients and stay alive. The endocrine system, that deals with all of the various hormones that affect everything we are, our thought process, our metabolism. Anyone who has an endocrine problem understands the growth of the body, metabolism, everything about us is affected by hormones. Even our mental stability is affected by hormones. Then there's the immune system. Without the immune system, we would all cease to function very quickly because we are surrounded by so many pathogens. Viruses and bacteria are all over us, and we would die within days of infection were it not for our immune system, which is built into the body and part of your bloodstream. Then there's the integumentary system, or your skin. The skin represents the largest single organ of the body, and it is incredibly complex. I'll show you a slide in a minute. Just skin. Then the lymphatic system, which is a collection of fluids outside of the blood vessels, which return all of the fluid that is leaked out of the capillaries by design to flush through the rest of the body to provide nutrients, cleansing, autoimmune functions. The lymph system is very important to us. Then we have muscular, that which causes us to move. The nervous system, everything about our nerves, from our brains to the function of everything that we can control. Reproductive system, without which there would be no more of us. Respiratory, your breath. Skeletal, the bones in our body. Urinary, the elimination of liquid waste. Every one of these are complex processes. They require special organs, and without each of the organs, life ceases to exist. The human body is phenomenally made. Anyone who looks at the careful structure that goes into the human body is fascinated by the design. It is not something that happened, but rather shows intricate design. Look, for example, at the inset here of this human hand, and notice the wristbands. Now, these tendons here are all tied together, which gives your bones structure. Without that, your hand would just fall limp. All of these structures, all of the tendons and muscles that go through the various bones of your wrist are all held together. The muscles that control your finger are actually up in your forearm. You can feel them work. They are connected by a cord, which we call a tendon, that runs up to a main muscle up in your arm. So when you move your finger, the muscle for it is actually in your arm. Well, how did that come to be? How did we get that bone and that tendon and that muscle and it run through this tunnel? And any of you who have developed carpal tunnel syndrome from too much typing, when that band around your wrist begins to put too much pressure on there, guess what? It starts making your fingers numb, and you have trouble moving things and feeling things. Carpal tunnel. Well, that's just a design problem. I mean, that's just a reaction of our body when something begins to break down. It was designed to work, and it does well. Let's look at skin for just a minute. Just take a little piece of your skin and look at how complicated skin is. And it is incredibly complicated. On the back of your hand, you probably can see the hair follicles coming out of your hand. Well, That represents that little hair shaft there. Did you know that that hair shaft goes down into a bulb? And into that bulb, it also has an oil gland in there. And every single hair you have has got a blood vessel that feeds it, a little capillary that goes in. And if that capillary dies, your hair is going to die and fall out. Now, there are a number of reasons why hair falls out, but every single hair of your body has got its own blood supply. Hey, think about the wiring and the complication necessary to make that work out. Your sweat glands. Your body is covered with tiny little glands whose only purpose is to keep your body cool, to regulate your thermostat. It is an incredible design. Yes, sir.
Question: if a bald-headed man has no hair, did he lose any of these?
The gland stays intact. The hair shaft can die for a number of reasons. But the skin stays where it is.
Okay, good.
What we see is an irreplaceability. Human technology cannot create a single major organ, even with intelligent effort. There have been, for years, attempts to produce things. You might say, well, wait a minute, what about the Jarvik heart? There's an artificial heart. Who's walking around with an artificial heart? Do you know anyone? No, because they're not functional. They can keep someone alive for a short period of time, but you know where our heart is? It is a muscle about this big inside your chest, and all of the attempts to make anything that functions even close to it have failed. Well, what about kidney dialysis? Yes, we have a process where you can plug into a person, drain their blood out to a huge machine, run it through some special filters, and do some of the things the kidneys do. But the kidneys do it just like that, constantly rejuvenating your blood. All of those, by the way, the dialysis machines, any of you know anyone on dialysis? What does it do to them? How do they feel? Terrible. That's how they feel, because it destroys so much of the body chemistry. How do you feel? Do you feel terrible because your kidneys are working? No. You feel good because they're doing exactly what they're designed to do. Human technology cannot create even one living cell, not one blood cell, not one antibody, not one neuron, not one square inch of skin. We cannot create anything. Every single cell in our body is phenomenally complex. In this photograph, or this drawing rather, what you see here is a artist reproduction of some of the complexity of the human body. Starting here in a recognition of the heart, with the various veins, the blue veins that return blood to the heart, the red arteries which carry blood away from the heart and lungs to your body, and the very complicated red blood cells. Most people don't like talking about blood. Your blood is truly amazing. What is blood? Blood is not just a liquid. It is a tissue. It is thick because it is made up of a variety of cells, each having a different job. Blood is approximately 80% water and 20% solids. The solids in there are all kinds of specialized cells. It's mostly plasma, but there are three other special cells in there. You have red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. The red blood cells carry oxygen. Its primary job is to carry oxygen to and from the various body tissues, and that's part of your breathing process. And the platelets are what keeps you from bleeding to death. You have in your blood all the time tiny little pieces of material that if you get a break in your skin where you're cut and the blood starts rushing out, these little devices are supposed to plug the hole. Well, why don't they plug the hole everywhere else? Well, sometimes they do. We call that a stroke or a heart attack. Because when things plug up, and there are a number of reasons that can plug the various tiny capillaries of the body. This slide I took from a hospital. Let's see if I got it. Yeah, it'll come up in a minute. I think it's in Texas. Look at this. Look what they describe blood as. An incredible machine. Here's the hospital, and they're describing blood as a machine. Now, what do you know about machines? How many machines began to exist on their own? None. Machines had to be created. There's a recognition that this is doing a specifically engineered job. Blood is essential to life. Of course, you recall that God forbid the children of Israel to consume blood or to use the blood in any way for their own purposes because it had life in it. Well, that is so incredibly true. This image is intended to describe this process of the platelets, which cause clotting, white cells, which protects from infection, plasma, which is the fluid portion of the blood, and then the red blood cells, which bring oxygenation to you. And you probably can find a place on your wrist somewhere where you can see a vein, a blue line, where you have blood that has come from your heart and lungs oxygenated to the end of your body and is going back to the body, and it's expended its oxygen, and that little red blood cell is now a blue blood cell because it turns blue when it has carbon dioxide in it, and it's red when it has oxygen in it. And so you look down there, and that's why your veins are bluish. When you expose it to the air, it immediately turns red again because it picks up oxygen instantly when it's exposed to air. This is from a research scientist, David Stokes, and he says red blood cells have a characteristic biconcave disc shape that provides a surface area to volume ratio that is optimal for gas exchange. Now, do you know what that means? That means it is perfectly designed in size and structure to transfer the gas of carbon dioxide and oxygen. Should we be surprised that it's perfectly designed? No, because we believe that God created blood. But for a scientist, an interesting slide that I did not include in this, he showed the structure of a red blood cell. And if you've ever used one of the little plastic or steel wool type dish scrubbing things in your kitchen, that's sort of the structure of a red blood cell. It is a weave of a fibrous tissue so that it can be compressed and expanded rapidly and instantaneously as it squeezes through the various capillaries and blood system. Mr. Stokes described the marvelous design of the red blood cell in its ability to do all of the things that it's got to do. Just for fun, your blood, each red blood cell lives for about 100 days, 90 to 100 days. Your body is constantly creating billions of new cells every day and consuming the same number. So it is constantly making sure that you have the right number of blood cells in your blood all the time. If you don't, you develop a disease. If you develop too few, you have anemia. If you develop too many, you have another problem where your blood gets too thick and they have to actually extract red blood cells from you. So there's a tremendous balancing that goes on. It's engineered into us. What does the blood do? An incredible machine. Carries oxygen from the lungs, nutrients from the digestive tract to the body's cells, and then carries away carbon dioxide, waste products, all of that from this fluid. Well, how did that fluid come to be in our bodies? How did the body exist prior to fluid? Blood and the blood pumping organs and the blood cleansing organs and the blood creating organs are all required to be present at the same time. You can't get any one of these piece at a time. Darwin's own definition fails on nothing more than blood. You have approximately 6 quarts of blood. This is just an interesting fact. Here's where I got this. St. Luke's Episcopal Hospital in Texas. Texas Heart Institute. Just for fun, you've got about 6 quarts of blood in you. Gallon and a half for you guys. A little less for you ladies. Every 20 seconds, the entire volume of your blood is pumped through your heart. It takes 20 seconds for your body to go through all of the blood you've got. So 3 times a minute, all of your blood is circulated through your body. 3 times a minute, that blood, every blood cell goes through the kidneys. Every blood cell goes through the brain. It is pumping all around all the time. So we are an amazing creation. How does it all work? Well, all life comes to an end without one of the major organs, the heart. The heart pumps us. It keeps us alive. But it keeps us alive because of the fluid that's in it. Which one came first, the blood or the heart?
That's the argument. What comes first, chicken or the egg?
That's right. You can ask that about any different piece of us. And how did the heart come to be 4 chambers? We've got 4. Some of you, any of you had, I won't ask that, that's a little too personal. I was going to ask you had any heart surgery, but if you know the structure of the heart, how complicated it is. Oh, wow, here we are, an incredible machine. How does the heart work? It's just a pump, right? It does what it's supposed to do. What controls it? Well, as a matter of fact, there are some electrical pieces inside the heart that make the heart do its job. And it is very, very complicated. The heart's rhythm is controlled by electrical impulses. It starts up here in a little node, the sinatrial mode. Then you have the, you're probably killing you with those words, atrioventricular node. And then it is carried down this until it branches off to the left and the right side of the heart, which causes your heart to beat 70 times a minute approximately at rest. That's working. You never know it. But that electrical function is what's making the heart work. How did this design? Oh, wait, it's not designed. It just happened by what? We came out of the dirt? And then as we put the heart into its place, and we see all of the veins and organ of the arteries, the red arteries carry blood off to the body. But if you push it off to the body, how do you get it back? Well, you have a collection process that recovers it. In this room is some air conditioning. I hope it's comfortable for you. But if you'll notice, over here by the door, there's a vent. Over here by this side, there's a vent. And where air comes into this room from somewhere else. But in order for it to come in, it's got to go out. Well, right now the doors are open, so air can just go out. But there's also vents here to recover that air and bring it back. Well, these are necessary in order for this room to be comfortable. In order for your body to function, That blood has to go off into your various tissues, but then you've got to have something to get it back. And it's all controlled. You don't have just blood running around in your body. Every bit of it is in a vein or a vessel or an organ. It's piped, just like the water in this building is piped to a water fountain, or it's piped to a toilet, or it's piped to a sink. We don't have just water flowing around in the building. You don't have blood just running around in your body. Every bit of it is in a designed organism, a structure. Every system, every organ, every fluid, structure, and cell shows specific, intentional performance without which the body would not function as it does. In other words, they demonstrate design. Things that can be said against evolution. There is a phrase, irreducible complexity.
Question, not a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So the human body and animal body, so they have kind of, the same design, like heart and a brain and everything like that. The difference is kind of the fact there's intelligence. That God has given us the ability to actually have intelligence. We can use our hands in ways. We can make things. We can imagine things and come up with new ideas, but animals can't.
That's correct.
That's something even special that God gave us, that we have that ability on top of everything. We can read, we can learn, we can understand words. Animals, they can't do that.
That's correct. When we start talking about awareness, conscience, the higher functions of the human brain still are not well understood by those who are doing the studying of them. A scientist cannot tell you why humans have consciousness and awareness of self and animals don't. They keep trying, but it hadn't happened yet.
When Jesus died on the cross, and 3 days later, he rose up, his spirit, and he still ate. How did he still eat?
He still had his physical body.
When Jesus, copy sidewalk, when Jesus ascended, that we'll eat and drink in heaven, right? Oh no, you're talking about on the earth, when he came back on the earth.
He was still in his same physical body. When he showed Thomas standing with the disciples, he said, "Put your hand in my side." The hole was still there. "Touch my hands. Put your fingers in the nail holes." He still had the holes in his body from the injuries, which that's an interesting question. Why weren't they healing? Why wasn't he bleeding? Obviously, there's some special things there that we still don't know about Jesus following his resurrection. But the concept of irreducible complexity means that a structure cannot be made more simple than it is and still function. It has to have all of the pieces. Take, for example, the human eye. In order for the eye to function, what is necessary? Well, all of it. You can't have any part of it not there and it function. Starting from the outside, and this drawing is some of it's hard to see. Starting from the very outside, you have the cornea. That is the clear covering on the outside of your eye. From the cornea, moving inside, you have what's described as an aqueous chamber, a little area of fluid in front of the lens. Then you have what we see, the color, as the iris. This iris portion, which is here as just a little slot, that's the colored disc of your eye. And that's what opens and closes to allow more or less light to shine into your eye, and allows the body to regulate how much light enters the eyeball. Everything about human physiology is designed to be regulated. It's not just on or off. There are functions that control everything. Your temperature, your hunger, your hormones, whether you're sleeping or awake, everything is regulated. There's a system to keep it in place. Then you have the lens itself. Why do you folks have glasses on? Some of you don't. Those of us who are wearing glasses, I did not wear glasses until I was 40 years old. My eye was formed properly, but as I've aged, the lens portion of my eye is not soft anymore. It's not flexible. And so it can't move in and out the same way, so I have to wear glasses in order to see properly. Some of you do as well. Well, what if you take that lens out? It's perfectly clear. What if you take that lens out? You can't see. The eye is completely worthless. What if you take the fluid out between the cornea and the iris? Then it can't function. What if you take the large ball of fluid, the vitreous humor, out that exists behind the eye lens and in front of the nerves that pick up the light? What if you take that out? What if you make it longer? What if you make it shorter? Then vision doesn't function. Your eye has to be exactly made dimensionally, or the eye will not function. It has to be the right size. It has to be the right shape. It has to have all of these pieces, or it won't work. And right now we're just talking about the crude structures of the eye. On the back of the eye is the retina, the nerve bed that receives all of the information that you're seeing and converts light into electrical impulses. Those electrical impulses are transmitted down the optic nerve into a special place in the brain that interprets everything you see as what you see. If the eye was not connected by the optic nerve to the brain, you would have no vision. Without all the complex, if you didn't have the retina, you'd have no vision. If you didn't have this vitreous humor, no vision. Without the lens, no vision. Without the pupil, no vision. Without the cornea, no vision. Every piece of the eye is necessary in order for it to function at all. Darwin says if there is a single complex organ which cannot be explained by simple addition of functions, then his system fails. Darwin himself said he had trouble understanding how the eye could develop. Well, there's a reason for that. It didn't. The other thing regarding creation is the complexity of DNA. DNA cannot exist naturally. Now, to understand DNA, and it's been a struggle, inside every cell are the strands of DNA that make up the chromosomes, which define who you are. Every cell of your body has DNA in it. DNA is phenomenally complex on its own. What does it do? DNA is the blueprint of biological life. From the time you are born, its beginning, until you die. The simplest answer for why is DNA important is that DNA is the prerequisite for life's inception. You don't get life without DNA. DNA is required. It dictates life. First, it transfers hereditary information from generation to generation. That is, it takes it from one and gives it to another. Darwin understood he could not explain the beginning of life. You can't start. You have to have something to start with to pass it along. It can't begin on its own. The second thing is DNA determines the structure of every cell whether it's a nerve, an eye. Yes?
I think the DNA is over behind each of those letters.
What's the meaning of DNA?
Yeah, DNA is an abbreviation of 3 words.
Yeah, a word about that long. Let's see. I'm not sure I can put it all together. Deoxy something, nucleic acid is what DNA stands for. I guess I should have included that in the side, so I'm going to talk about it. But we're just about out of time. Let me explain the significance of DNA. The famous atheist, Antony Flew, cited DNA as the reason he gave up the promotion of atheism. Antony Flew was one of the leading atheists up until the mid-90s. And he came out and wrote a book. In fact, his book was entitled, There Is a God, which is interestingly enough. He says, what I think the DNA material has done is that it has shown by the almost unbelievable complexity of the arrangements which are needed to produce life, that intelligence must have been involved in getting these extraordinarily diverse elements to work together. This is Antony Flew, an atheist, who says, I can no longer believe in atheism because DNA is simply too complicated. It could not begin by itself. In a video in December of 2004, he stated, superintelligence is the only good explanation for the origin of life and the complexity of nature. Well, our time is gone. It doesn't take much to understand that our bodies are created. When you look carefully at any piece, the simplest of your fingernails as part of your skin system is very, very complex. Yes, sir.
I have to say, thank you for this lecture. Second, we must give more thanks to God for His intelligence. He is more intelligent than any man on earth who could create such a complex system as this.
We are so complex, even with all of our study and our technology, we cannot make the most simple part of our body as a living thing. It cannot be done. Life still is in the hands of God. Thank you for your time, and I hope that your study in this area will continue. Yes?
Now, what's your background?
What's your background? I'm curious. Your
Background.
background.
Well,
Are you medical background or anything like that?
no, I have some engineering background in the past.
Oh, okay.
But
I'm just curious.
any other questions?
You guys have some of the camera again. There we go. I was reading in a magazine. It was called Think magazine, and it's done by the Church of Christ. And I think maybe it was Brad Harrop who wrote that article. A woman grew up in Iowa, and she never went to church. Well, her girls grew up, and they loved to study the blood, and especially in high school, and they graduated, and they went to the University of Iowa. They studied, and they just loved to work with blood and learn about that, and DNA also. And then the university got a University of
Reading in England.
Reading. There we go, Reading in England, and went there and learned 6, 7, 8 years, and became really advanced in the study of that, and went to Oxford as well. Asked that, and the teacher asked the girl, said, "Would you like to be a teacher at Oxford?" And so brought her these books, these textbooks. The girl went home and she was studying it. She went back to Oxford, and the girl said, I can't accept that. I can't accept evolution. She's a professional in Oxford, and they all look and say, why? She says, I can't believe that the blood evolved. Look at all this details. There's no way that could evolve. And that caused her to actually become a believer in God. Think about that.
Wow.
We are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yes,
Thank
you're right.
you for
Thank
your
you.
time this morning. And thank Ray.